Greetings and welcome to Writers on Writing. I am your host, Dr. Brenda Greene, founder and executive director of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College and director of the National Black Writers Conference. This program is paid for by Medgar Evers College, and we come to you each week and give you, our listening audience, an opportunity to listen to writers talk about their work, their craft, and their lives. And we are very, very pleased also that we have given you an opportunity to view this on our YouTube page, which is on the Center for Black Literature website. So I am very, very pleased to have with me today a scholar who I've known for many, many years, the longtime activist and scholar and writer, Dr. OBERY Hendricks. Welcome, Dr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Dr. Greene. And yes, we have a long association, and so it's a pleasure to be with you. I must say, I really have to congratulate you on all the great work you've done over the years with the book conference and Black Literature Center. So I'm really glad to be here.
Well, thank you. We're pleased to have you. And you are known as one of the foremost commentators on the intersection of religion and political economy in America. You're probably the most widely read and perhaps the most influential African-American biblical scholar writing today. You've been even called a Black evangelist. We'll come back to that. Your recent book, Christians Against Christianity, How Right-Wing Evangelicals Are Destroying Our Nation and Our Faith, has gathered wide acclaim, and Cornel West calls you one of the last few grand prophetic intellectuals. You are also widely sought as a lecturer and media spokesperson and have appeared on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Fox Business News, the Discovery Channel, PBS, even Japan, NHK Japan Television, and the Bloomberg Network, as well as provided commentary on MSNBC and the Al Jazeera and Aspire international television workshops. And your award-winning books, all of which I've read, The Politics of Jesus, Rediscovering the True Revolutionary Nature of Jesus's Teachings and How They've Been Corrupted, was declared essential reading for Americans by the Washington Post. You also have written Living Water, which is your novel, very, very interesting. One of the first books I read, and how I was introduced to you at a National Black Writers Conference. And of course, we're going to be focusing on Christians Against Christianity. And I'm going to stop there, because I find that one of the things you've done over the years, if you've taken the Bible and you've made it accessible by writing stories and by writing essays that reflect ways that we can look at the Bible from a different perspective. And I want to start with Living Water, because I was blown away by what you did in Living Water. Then we'll go into the politics of Jesus, and continue with discussing Christians Against Christianity. So I'd like, if you can begin, what was the motivation behind writing Living Water?
Well, thank you, Dr. Greene. Well, there are a couple motivations. One motivation was that I got tired of hearing preachers use the story of the woman at the well who had 5 husbands from the Gospel of John being used against women. Preachers saying stuff like, women always looking for love in all the wrong places and all that, when women of that era didn't have the right to initiate marriage or divorce. And I wanted to set the record straight. It started out as a short story, though, writing for my daughter's graduation from high school. And it just took on a life of its own, in which, I felt that it was giving me the opportunity to explore some of the different kinds of interactions between Black men and Black women. As you know, Living Water is a African-American retelling of the story of the woman at the well. Also, I wanted to write about a biblical story in a way that Black people could see ourselves in the biblical narrative. So all the characters are described as various, hues of
Yes.
Black folk, and they have, it's set back in the first century, and it's, Hebrew names, and it's set in Israel and all that. But the way the people speak, their idioms and, their moral culture, sort of, it's inspired from, by rural African-American, culture. So that's essentially why I wrote it. I wrote it to try to raise some consciousness among Black people in terms of seeing ourselves in the Bible. And also, I must say also, to help Black men look at the ways that we mistreat women, often, inadvertently, not even realizing how wrong we are. That's why I wrote it.
So you're a feminist also.
Well,
Okay.
I became that. I learned so much, writing that book. I had to write about this woman's ugly Negro husbands, and and as I tried to envision them, men discarding her and mistreating her, I started realizing, like, some of the stuff the brothers did, not the worst of it, but some of the stuff was stuff that me and my buddies had sort of engaged in. I'm like, oh my God, I cried so much writing that book. So I learned a lot.
Okay, so it provided you with some introspection, self-introspection.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you switched and you went into, I guess, your natural, the natural genre for you, which is more scholarship. What was that like, moving from the narrative of the fiction, the novel, to the scholarship? I imagine you had been doing scholarship all along. So what was the difference between that for you?
Well, Sarah, let me just add this about Living Water. I forgot that it's being it's in the process of being produced as a play.
Oh, wonderful! Oh,
yeah, it's in the early stages, so there's not much to be said about it. But that I can say that it's coming to fruition little by little.
Right. I think that's kind of a hidden gem. I mean, the themes are so universal, and it's so timely now when you look at what we're going through, and the whole, the ways that we are having a need to make sure that our story is told, and told with that Black gaze, and also the whole gender discrimination that we're having, and the need to recognize women and to value them in a different way, and to look at relationships. So the timing is perfect.
Yeah,
I can say I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. And in terms of the shift, being trained as a biblical scholar, actually my doctorate's in religions of late antiquity, which includes early Christianity. I wrote The Politics of Jesus really to try to fit, and as you said, it was natural for me, but I wrote it to try to fit the gap of biblical scholarship that acknowledged the political radicality of the radical political dimension of Jesus' ministry, which is so little written about and understood, to the detriment of certainly of Black people, holding Jesus as someone whose feet barely touch the ground, and someone who was not concerned, who's only concerned about personal piety and all that. And so I shifted gears and I brought my own political understandings to it. And the book was written, it was published in 2006, and it's still being discovered and selling well now. And it's been particularly influential of the new generation of scholars, because it really takes seriously the political dimension and implications of the gospel of Jesus Christ for liberation in this world, and it militates against libertarian sensibilities, for instance, and radical individualism. And so that's how I got to that. And you're right, that's more natural for me, given my political, commitments. Even though the book is not anachronistic in that, I don't import modern political sensibilities into Jesus' ministry. What I try to do is read out in his setting and in his life setting, the political meaning of things that he did, like the politicality of the Lord's Prayer, for instance, talking about your kingdom come when Caesar's kingdom is already there. And so those are the kinds of things I thought really need to be brought out to sort of free Black people from the often backward, self-limiting way that we approach the Bible.
Right, I understand. So how I did not share with our audience that, of course, you are the past president of Payne Theological Seminary and a former Wall Street investment executive. And currently you're visiting scholar at Columbia University in the Department of Religion and the Department of African American and African Diasporic Studies at Union Theological Ceremony. And also you're at Yale. You're also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And when I think about living water and then the politics of Jesus, how have your professional experiences shaped or impacted why you decided to write what you did, or have they?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. The time I spent on Wall Street gave me an interesting perspective on the workings of capitalism, and I grew up, as you probably know, I grew up in the Black cultural nationalist movement, with Amiri Baraka from my mid-teens, actually, and stayed friends with him until his death, so that shaped my political commitments and my understanding of political radicality. I won't say revolution, because revolution is, we were very romantic in our notions about revolution, but that's so. Having seen that and having focused so deeply on the workings of oppression that I learned in the movement and through the years, and then bringing that together with seeing how capitalism works on Wall Street, that really deeply influences my scholarship.
Okay. And so then we come to Christians Against Christianity. Mm-hmm. It's probably very apparent why you had to write that book, but share with our audience your motivation for needing to write that book. A very, very important book, which you just continue going, exposing everything, breaking everything down for us.
Look, man, Donald Trump is so, and his minions and behind kissers are just, they're just so destructive, and they're so wrong and so evil, that I just had to throw my hat in the ring among those who try to expose him, because Trump and his folks, these right-wing evangelicals, their basic commitments are anti-Christian, yet they are the loudest group of Christian believers in America who have the most political influence, and they just had to be There's so much there, it's hard for me to get it out. But their wrongheadedness, their deep and manifest evil needed to be dealt with on the basis of the document that they claim to live by, and that is the Bible. You know, many political commentators, many theologians have deconstructed what they're about, but they get away with it because they keep pointing to chapter and verse. The Bible says this, the Bible says that. Well, I want to show that the way they use the Bible and that they have weaponized it in the weaponized it in service to evil. And so I wrote Christians Against Christianity to show how wrong they are, how their assumptions and misuse of the Bible are so wrong, and with regard to gays, and with regard to abortion, with regard to unions, with regard to immigration, on down the line. And of course, their racist roots, their rabidly racist roots had to be exposed because too many people were giving them a pass. So that's why I wrote Christians Against Christianity. And I've gotten a lot of hate, but I've gotten a lot of love too for writing the book. So it balances out.
Right. So can you give us a couple of examples of how you argue for that? Because one of the things that you said we have to do is really always remember to look at the political context. And we should not read the Bible and look at it as remaining relevant in today's age. My minister talked about the recognition that and then you alluded to this, that the Bible has universal appeal, but also particularities. And he talked about the Bible is full with many paradoxes, you know, and so how do you argue, for example, around, you know, you can take one of them, you know, Christianity, I mean, not Christian, immigration or the gender.
Well, how about abortion?
Abortion, yes.
Yeah, you know, the reality, you know, these right-wing evangelicals act like the most important issue, almost a qualifying litmus test to be really Christian, has to do with whether you oppose abortion or oppose a woman's right to choose or not. And the reality of it is that the Bible doesn't talk about voluntary abortion at all. Jesus never says anything about abortion, neither does Paul at a time when abortion was very rampant. Also, the few times that abortion is mentioned at all, it's in Exodus chapter 21, verse 22, 23. It says, if men are fighting and a woman is injured by their fight, and her the fetus she's carrying is injured or killed, that the fine is an eye for the woman's injury, but you just pay a financial fine for the fetus. Makes a distinction, right? It's like and then the only other place, and preachers, you never hear them talk about this, is the book of Numbers, chapter 5, in which it says that God will kill, that if a married woman is found to be pregnant by a man other than her husband, that her punishment is that God will kill the fetus. What's that, divine abortion, right?
That's right.
That's the only place it talks about it. And there's never been a consensus throughout Christian history of when a fetus becomes a person, when a fetus is imbued with a soul. So this whole thing about you know, at conception, when you just have a zygote, and you know that if you do something with a zygote, you're a murderer. All of that, that's not true. But what I also point out is that up until the late 70s, early 80s, abortion was basically a Catholic concern. Yes. It was only when the leaders of right-wing evangelicals came together and tried to decide what issues could they come up with that they could use to try to bring them to dominance of society, that they chose abortion along with homosexuality as their wedge issues. In other words, these are political strategies that they're using, but they have people believing that this is the word of God, but the Bible never says anything about abortion at all. And so I tried to bring these kinds of things to people's consciousness and awareness.
Right. So given what's happening and given the growing number of evangelicals, what do you see as the way forward? I mean, as a writer, you're bearing witness and you're raising the consciousness. But what can we do in this society? It's really alarming in many ways of what's going on, and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, well, I think there are a couple of things. One thing, we have to start returning to the use of the term evil, and stop soft peddling things as just political strategy or political correctness or something like that. Some stuff is just evil and it must be opposed. Not only that, we have to accept that the most basic ethic of the biblical witness, the entire witness, is justice. And in the book, I explain how it really means, but through looking at various scriptures and particularly the way the Hebrew is translated. The basic foundation is social justice, and we have to call the faith back to that, and we have to hold those who stand in an antithetical position to it. We have to hold them responsible and reject them. And they can call themselves anything, but we can't allow them to say that they are the ones who are the arbiters of what is Christian. We also have to remember that if you're a Christian, then you must pay attention to what Jesus said. He said the two most important commandments are love your Lord your God, all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And in social human terms, love your neighbor as yourself, which also implies egalitarian, political, social, economic egalitarianism. And so we have to talk about egalitarian justice. And lastly, the only real judgment that Jesus gave us, the way we should judge ourselves and the way God judges us, is in Matthew 25:31-46, in which he says, those who try to help others, essentially, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, who are concerned about incarceration on down the line. In other words, those who are concerned about doing justly by people, that they will go to heaven. But those who aren't concerned, who aren't trying to help anyone, that they will go to hell. And what it doesn't talk about, it doesn't judge who you sleep with. It doesn't judge what your political party is. It judges whether you're trying to do justice in the world. If we can call these backward churches, and that includes a whole lot of Black churches, if we could call them to the biblical wit, what the Bible says itself, instead of a whole lot of mess that they keep coming up with, then maybe we have a chance. I don't have a lot of hope, though, that American Christianity, which has always been racist from the very beginning, always had white supremacy infused in it, I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to see enough change anytime soon. I mean, in generations. I just can't see it. I know that Hitlerism still lives, and Trumpism has the same kind of evil impetus. And I'm afraid we're going to see the same presence of Trumpism in America as we see Hitlerism in Germany and around the world. And that
I think one of the, I understand what you're saying, and there are many times I feel the same way, and more times than not. But part of the problem I think we have is that there are so many people who will not articulate that they're Christians. I mean, what message do you give to people who are not practicing, who are not going to church? I shouldn't say practicing Christianity, because that's different. What do you say to the people who've given up? What do you say to the people who say, well, Christianity is just connected with, being a member of a church, and who are not looking at the values? And how do we get, the younger people involved?
I think we have to stress the ethical foundation of the biblical witness, and that it's mainly concerned throughout the Bible. It's mainly concerned with doing justice in the world, building a just and loving egalitarian society. And the reason I mention that is because I think all people of goodwill can hew to that, can accept to that and see the value of that. And I guess the other thing is to redefine how folks see Jesus. They continue to see him as some namby-pamby, pie in the sky guy. He doesn't have much relevance, but they could see that his main concern, other than God, was always about the plight of the poor and the suffering. He was concerned about social injustice. And in his manifesto in Luke 4, he said, "The Spirit of the Lord's upon me because he anointed me to bring good news to the poor," which is, the implication is structural justice, economic justice in society at the very least. And so if we can do that, I think, we can call people, and I don't know the folk need to be called to the church as much as they need to be called to the gospel. And maybe, they'll go to, because there are a whole lot of churches that, well, I don't want to say they waste people's time, but they waste a lot of resources, and
Well, it reminds me of, we lost our beloved Bell Hooks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about her book, All About Love, which is, I think, was arguing the same thing, that we need a love ethic. And it's not about romantic love. It's about working with people. It's about caring for people and nurturing and helping them to grow.
Yes, yes.
So we need a love ethic that needs to be interspersed.
Yes, yes. And that's why when he says, love your neighbor as yourself, the whole Bible is concerned with the common good, right? And not just individualism. And so love is really, we talk about love. Love is really about looking at the common good, looking out for our neighbors. Right. Because if we fight for our neighbor to have all the goods we want, and our neighbor fights for us, we can have a decent society.
Right. So part of we just had a conference, The Beautiful Struggle. So I like to, as we come to a close, to ask you to reflect on what has been your struggle. And would you call it a beautiful struggle? Do you believe in that term? That the theme was the beautiful struggle, Black writers lighting the way, which has to do with how we struggle, but we continue to move forward and triumph. So can you, based on your experiences and your observations, reflect on that? Or even how you see it in literature?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it is beautiful that we continue to struggle and make headway as Black writers, continue to elucidate dimensions of reality that need to be brought to light and that are creative and innovating for our people. But for me, it's not been a beautiful struggle. It's been a painful struggle.
Okay.
And a frustrating struggle because I only write books when I'm angry or outraged.
Okay. And what is that process like for you?
Something like with this last book, looking at that demon, lying piece of trash, Trump, and all those lying preachers that are around him that would causing so much pain and horror and such hate mongering. Seeing them is like, I could either blow a fuse or pick up the pen, and I did a little of both. Okay. And so I just react. I wrote my first book, Living Water, out of outrage with the way the biblical text was being used against women, and on down the line. So that's my process. That's why I've only published 4 books. We didn't mention one. And it's called The Universe Bends Toward Justice. It's a collection of essays. But that's why I've only published 4 books in 20-something years. Unlike some of my friends, like my classmate Michael Dyson seems to get a book out every year, every 6 months, and I wish I could. I'm happy for him. but I can only write when, I'm really pushed, to a point of passion and pain.
Okay, that's for real. You write to resist. Okay, so do you have another book percolating in there?
Actually, I not really. I mean, there's some thoughts in my head. One thing I'd like to do is, well, I mean, I don't know if it makes sense now, but tentatively I've called it a political economy of the kingdom of the kingdom of God. When I want to write like a practical, accessible, how can I sort of, I want to look at the political implications, the practical political implications of this notion of the kingdom of God, or as Martin Luther King called it, the beloved community, which I believe are democratic socialist implications. So I want to write that kind of political economy and about policy and all that. As you can hear, it's not really clear in my head, but it's coming. It's reverberating and rattling around in there.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, I want to ask our viewers to go out and purchase, and I don't know if you can see it, Christians Against Christianity. The lighting is not good here. Maybe you can hold up your book. My lighting is not good. Christians Against Christianity. There you go. How right-wing evangelicals are destroying our nation and our faith. Fascinating book. And what I love about it is it's accessible. It speaks to everyone, and you are documenting all the time. So I thank you for the work you do. I thank you for calling out and making us aware and channeling that frustration and anger into writing something.
And thank you for all that you do, sincerely. Thank you, because you've made such a contribution over the years, the Black Letters.
You're welcome. And I want to remind our listening audience that the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Keep reading and writing, empower yourselves as readers and writers. Write me at writers@mec.cuny.edu. Come back next week. And remember, this radio program is paid for by Medgar Evers College. And you can also watch this interview on our YouTube page at www.centerforblackLiterature.org. Thank you so much, Dr. Henderson. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gray.